Good afternoon, everybody. And we are going to go over chapter 5 in my book, A Spiritual Soul Book. I'm trying to make these classes about 15-20 minutes. So obviously, there's a lot more depth that we can discuss on the many, many subjects, especially that we're going to touch upon today. I hope you enjoy the short and to the point reading of chapter 5 in A Spiritual Soul Book. Pick the book up, look at the words and at the letters that are shared with you in this very, very special book, A Spiritual Soul Book.com. Okay, the character of the soul is reflected in our thoughts. That's the title of chapter 5. Before I begin this chapter, let's quickly review what we have learned over the past few chapters. First, we established that the soul has three garments. Kabbalah, mysticism, Hasidus describes it that way. And if Kabbalah and Hasidus and the Torah describe it that way, that means it's exactly the way God created it. It's not coming from anybody's brain. It's not coming from studies. It's coming from actuality. The Torah says exactly how God created the human being. So people who are godly, they know exactly what to look for in human beings. And they tell us that the soul has three garments: thought, speech, and action, and that we can choose when to put them on and when to take them off. A garment, just like you see one over here, is put on and it's taken off when I decide to put it on or to take it off. It's up to me to decide on how to use my actions, how to express my words, and how and what to fill my thoughts with. Because thoughts is a garment to the soul, to the thinking process, to the intellectual, rational capacity of my soul. My words is a garment. It's superimposed. It's placed upon who I am. My emotions, my deep down feelings can be covered and can communicate through the garment of speech, through the garment of action. The next chapter taught us that even when we don't feel like it, or we are not in the mood, we can always find a way into the thoughts and garments that we choose. You don't have to be necessarily in the mood to put certain clothes on. You just got to do it. You got to put on those clothes if that's what's expected, whether you're in the mood or not. You can, and sometimes you should. The same thing is also with thought, speech, and action. You can put yourself into those garments, into certain thoughts. If you really choose to think certain thoughts, you can start pushing your way into that direction. Same thing is also with speech. I don't feel like saying a certain word right now, but it's the right thing to do. So you can put yourself, who you are, can communicate and can express itself through a speech that you don't necessarily feel like doing, but it's the right thing and it's the proper thing. You could, and therefore you should. We then learned that the only way to take control of our thoughts is to consciously be aware of what we are thinking and then think the thoughts that we want to. So some people say, it comes into my mind. Well, that's because you allow it to come into your mind. If you don't want it to come into your mind, change what's coming into your mind. Insert different thoughts. Combine different letters and words and sentences, and then you will be thinking something different. Thoughts are continuous and always connected to the soul, and that's powerful. This garment of thought is not like the garment of speech and action. It's constantly attached to the soul. Unlike speech, where there is a time to speak and a time to be quiet, listen to these two very important things about thought. Thought is constant. It's a constant garment that the soul is expressing itself through that garment and more deeply attached to the soul. Unlike speech and action, which is a little bit further from the soul, because thought is constant, since it is completely and totally attached to the soul, so what you think is going to have a deeper effect on the soul than how you communicate and how you express yourself through the other garments of speech and action. Because the garment of thought is always worn and is closest to the soul, right? Those are two very important points that differentiate thought from speech and action. Number one, it's always working. And number two, it's closest to the soul. Thoughts have the greatest influence on a person. Thoughts have the greatest influence on a person. Also, the stain that comes as a result of one's thoughts, whether or not it is for the better, will be deeper on one's soul. Because thought is constant and it's deeper and it's more closely connected with the soul, for the good and for the bad, what happens as a result of the thoughts process and proximity with the soul is a lot deeper than the other garments. We see in clothes, when a person puts on nice clothing, he actually changes his mood and feels good and honorable. Garments in the Talmud is described as my honor. That's how we describe when we want to bring attention to a person's clothes. The way it's called in Hebrew is my honor. And that's because they bestow honor to the person who is wearing the clothes, honor or dishonor. When one dons honorable clothing, he will feel admirable and will be treated admirably. That's two things. When you put on nice clothes, expensive clothes, good looking clothes, it has actually an effect on you. Backwards. Sometimes you say, I need to feel a certain way in order to think this way, or to talk that way, or to act that way. So it's like coming from the inside, and then that is a indication of your choice for the garment. Something goes the other way around. Your choice of the garment will have an effect on the way you think and on the way you feel and on the way you act. And so it goes with the clothing of the soul. Garments manipulate the actual soul positively or negatively. That's something that's very, very significant to know. They can and they will affect the soul positively or negatively. All positive speech, action, and thought will have a positive effect on the soul, not just superficially, but in actuality. Ultimately, and as I'm going to discuss in just a moment, creating routines and habits and patterns of the soul itself. So, in other words, it takes the shape of the kind of clothing that you donned upon the soul. Your identity, your me, my I is molded and it's shaped by the kinds of thoughts and the kinds of words and the kinds of speech that I decided through my free choice that God granted uniquely to human beings. This is going to mold and shape who I am in the present, what I become in the future, what I remain forever. With enough repetition, the garments of our soul, of which we are always in control, this is your decisions. This will eventually shape the actual soul in habit and in actuality for now and all eternity. Because besides the fact that every time you choose to do something, It's making a teeny little, your nails don't grow long overnight. They go teeny, teeny, teeny little steps before you know they become so long. Your hair doesn't get so long overnight. With teeny, teeny, teeny little steps, and then it becomes long hair. Same thing is also with the choices you make regarding the garments that you wear. Every time it's a positive garment and it's a reinforcing and a constructive, it's going to make that kind of an influence on your soul. But there's something else to this which is even more powerful, and that is the spiritual element of those choices. The spiritual element of those choices in itself, the choice itself that is made, is an energy that is generated. And then when it's a choice that is connected to holiness, holiness never leaves its place. Darkness and something that is negative, it expires after a while. But something positive remains forever. It has the quality of God in it. So it has eternal life in it. And this is what I wrote here in this book, a spiritual soul book. Obviously not my own words. This is all coming from the words of Hasidic discourses, from the Tanya, from great, tremendous sources. The spark of godliness inside ourselves that defines who we are, the me, the I. Who am I? I existed before I came into my body. I exist when I'm sleeping. I exist when I'm unconscious. I exist after 120 years and the body stops working. This I that defines who we are, and it remains alive even after we leave this world, will be formed forever by the habits and garments we regularly decided to place over our souls. That's incredibly powerful. So when you have the question, why should I do a certain good deed, even if it's only one time? Because this is going to remain with your soul forever. And if you do it regularly and it becomes something more permanent and more deeply entrenched and engraved within yourself, then that becomes a shape, that becomes a prism that you are going to live with for all eternity, forever. It's a mind-boggling thought to consider. A person's service to God is judged by the choices he makes regarding the clothing of his soul. What kind of a soul you have, that was decided in heaven. What came into your body, that was decided in heaven, and for a lot of other different reasons. What you take full responsibility for is your choices regarding the garment. You remember I mentioned in one of the earlier classes that all the commandments in the Torah are connected to the garments of the soul. There are a few that address your responsibility to change for the better the actual nature and personality of your soul. But the overwhelming majority of commandments that God expects of you to choose in the right direction is connected to the garments. It's a choice of action, in actual deed, in speech, to say the Shema every day. Everybody has a duty to pray. Women at least once a day, men 3 times a day. To get up, open up the prayer book and say the words, feel it or not. It's your duty as a Jewish person. And like all commandments in the Torah, when you do it, you're going to have a tremendous benefit and strength out of that commandment. A person's service to God is judged by the choices he makes regarding the clothing of his soul. What he is left with to stand before God is the result of those choices. What you are going to stand before God after 120 years, God is going to ask you, did you involve yourself honestly in business? Did you learn Torah? Did you have children? All these questions ask you and judge you by your answer are all connected to the garments and the 100% ability that you have in regards to those choices and those garments. After a while, with enough routine and habit, The thoughts that become automatic due to our past choices will express the character and nature of what our souls and what we ourselves have become. That's a jam-packed sentence over here that I wrote in this incredible book called A Spiritual Soul Book. When you make a choice enough times and it becomes a routine and it becomes a habit, because that's the way God created a person, that when you do something again and again and again, it's after a while going to happen by itself. You form a habit. The routine will repeat itself almost on its own. So these thoughts that you placed in your head, because these chapters are mostly addressing what our thoughts and our responsibility related and connected to thoughts, because a lot of people have the idea when it comes to thoughts that are not accurate according to the Torah and according to Hasidus and according to Kabbalah. That's why this book is very important, and it's illuminating and addressing this issue. When you choose enough times certain thoughts and they become automatic because they became routine, they became habit, so then what will happen is that they will mold your soul. Your soul will be compatible with those practices, and it at a certain point becomes who we are, expressing ourselves through those thoughts. For a person who has decided throughout, intellectual thoughts will always come to his mind. He gets attracted to that. It becomes his second nature, maybe even it turns into his first nature. And then he's always looking for those intellectual ideas and thoughts. He becomes attracted. It becomes comfortable, it becomes one with him. For a person who has decided to think joyously, cheerful and joyful thoughts will start flowing automatically. What you focus on and what you repeat, it will become a habit. It will mold your soul to fit into that habit. And then it becomes your character and personality and what you are sensitive and notice. And it becomes who you are. You just, that becomes your path in life. For some people, the thought to murder never enters their mind. Most normal people never think of killing somebody. It's not who they are. You just don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to kill this guy. I mean, even if you use that expression, there goes my phone. Even if you use that expression, it's you shouldn't be even talking those words according to what we're saying, because they could cause problems. Okay, let's keep that for a different discussion. But a normal person never really thinks of ever killing another human being. For others, the thoughts to contribute to society in a positive way will never enter their mind. They're so selfish, self-centered. They are so attuned to themselves that they never think in terms of trying to help somebody, to look where they can be of assistance, to look where they can contribute and help and be a meaningful help in the world and around them. In the end, what we think is a result of how we trained ourselves to think. When you have certain thoughts in your mind, you need to take the responsibility and the blame off for yourself, because you can change that. And the way you're thinking right now is a result of all the past thoughts and all the past words and all the past actions that you have allowed to flow and to work its way through your garments. You decided to entertain and to place those things upon yourself. The fact that thoughts manifest the personality and character traits of the soul bring a very to the contents of one's thought. You got to take it seriously. What you think. Proper thoughts reflect a healthy soul. They reflect a healthy soul either because the thoughts will make it healthy, or because their healthy soul decided that's all it wants to place upon itself. Either way, a person with healthy thoughts is a healthy soul, while empty and vain thoughts reflect an empty and a confused soul. And that's pretty bad, because that's hurting, and that's defining, and that's molding and creating a soul that lives that way, can't be happy. And that's forever. And that's a terrible thing. And you have the possibility, the crazy thing is that you have the possibility to change all of that. Even when these are thoughts, remain a reflection of the character of the soul in one way or the other. There's a story, I'm going to finish with this, and that's the end of chapter 5. Get yourself a copy of this book, because it's going to empower you. It's going to give you ideas that you've never, ever seen anywhere else, except for in Hasidus, except for in Hasidic discourses, except for in the works of Kabbalah. There's the Tanya tells us in Hasidic discourses, it describes how when a person is praying, so he meditates, which today they're recognizing its tremendous value, health value, soul value, psychological value, but we had that already for thousands of years. And when a person is praying and he's considering the translation of the words, and he's meditating on the greatness of God and on the beauty of connecting with that source of life and of cleansing his soul so that there's nothing that stands in the way of that connection. And all of a sudden, bad thoughts come in his mind, and they start to like infiltrate, and they start challenging his holiness and purity of thought. So some people may think to engage in those thoughts and try to address and answer and then try to dismember those bad thoughts. Chassidus says, no, don't do that. When bad thoughts come into your head, that's because they're coming from you. That's because you have some kind of a connection with those negative ideas. And the best way to address those thoughts is to ignore them and to strengthen the positive strength within yourself. If you were at Sa, those thoughts are not yours. They're coming from some of your students or some of the people who are around you and attached to you. So then, as a tzaddik, as a person who has a holy soul and a perfect soul and a strengthened soul, so then by dealing with those thoughts, you are refining and breaking them apart for the sake of somebody else. And you have that strength because you are over those thoughts. You are bigger than those thoughts. But when you get thoughts that come into your own head that are not good, frightening, scary, or whatever else it may be, that's because it's coming right out of the cesspool of your own sewer. It's because somehow you've allowed them to fester within yourself. So what's the point in trying to take it apart and trying to make sense of it? You're just putting yourself even deeper into that garbage. Right, in whatever way it could be, in whatever areas of life. The best way to do with it, especially when they are in prayer, is to keep on putting the emphasis on positive thoughts, on constructive thoughts, on ideas that will make the person move ahead and progress in a holy way, in a kosher way, in a good way. And that's the end of chapter 5. I'm going to put it on our Facebook page, A Spiritual Soul Book. So if anybody would like to discuss what we just talked about, you are welcome to do so, and I will try to address those discussions. Have a great day, everybody, and I hope you're going to get a lot of empowerment from these tremendous, powerful words.